Hello and welcome to the last Tomlin Harmonica podcast of 2020. I just wanted to thank you for listening and making this a fun project that I started this year during the COVID pandemic. And hopefully 2021 will be slightly less COVID heavy and a little bit more harmonica heavy. But I've been having a really great time doing this, and I've really enjoyed reading the feedback that I've been getting as well. So I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season, and I hope that you enjoy this week's episode where I'll be chatting about different approaches for improvisation with my incredibly good friend, Harry Higgs. Hello, Harry, and thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. How are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good, man. Pretty good.
So, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking an Innocent Gun lager beer.
Very nice. I have a milk stout by Drygate. For anyone listening, we're definitely evening time, and it's an appropriate moment in the day to have a chat about improvisation and have a beer.
It's not nice to lie. It's 8 a.m, Tomlin.
That's a totally appropriate time. No, it is 6 o'clock in the evening in Edinburgh, Scotland. So yeah, we're going to be chatting a little bit about improvisation today, but before we do, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our guest. So this is not a harmonica player, but this is my very good friend Harry Higgs, who is a guitarist who I play with at every available opportunity. He's the guitarist in my band Delacroix, and we've done a bunch of other stuff together. We've done workshops together. We've done a lot of cool projects.
Yeah, a lot of cool projects. It's and over a few years now, eh?
Yeah, it's been a good while, and yeah, we've. I think I've been struggling not being able to get a jam in with you over lockdown. I don't know how you feel about it. I don't really want to know.
No, I'm finding it quite difficult not playing music with other people in the same room. There's only so much you can do at home. And it's definitely, I think it's the ideal workshop time. You know, you can really get down to the nitty gritty of technique and practice, but it's not quite the same. It's very fun playing music with your friends and playing in front of people, and it's been tough not doing that.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, it's the woodshed time, isn't it? We're not actually seeing each other face to face, so we spend more time with a metronome than we do with real human beings, which is good for you.
Yeah, pros and cons.
So what I thought would be quite fun is, because you teach a lot, I kind of want to go through how you approach teaching improvisation, but at kind of different stages. So, you know, how you get started with someone who's never improvised before and is maybe quite a kind of beginner level player, technically not very advanced. How do you present it to them right at square one?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Given that I don't know, I think that I don't really have a concrete way of teaching that. I think really the beginning of it all, I try and encourage my students just to play whatever they think sounds good on an instrument, and that's with no scale involved or anything like that. You know, predominantly I'm teaching guitar, and to begin with, you know, you start off just learning a couple of notes. I'm just, you know, what do you think sounds good? Just show me what you've been messing around with this week, you know. And it starts off like that, and then, you know, depending on a particular student's interest, we'll sort of go down the avenue. If it's if they're into the folk kind of sound or blues, rock, anything like that, we'll generally always start with you know, the pentatonic scale, whether it's major or minor. And as soon as those sounds become familiar, and my student would be like, "Oh, I know this sound. This sounds good. I'm surprised how easy it is just to play along to this rhythm that you're playing." And I'm like, "Okay, well, this is just the start of it, you know." So from there, I'd say I just tell them to play around in the scale. I keep it fairly simple and only stick to one octave to begin with, and there's no pattern to learn or anything like that. You just have fun with the notes that you've got available. If you're sticking to the scale, you're not going to do anything wrong.
Yeah.
That's I say that's step one, really. A fairly broad step, and that it can take a long time, but yeah, that's
but I think that's a really solid first step. I'm always intrigued with how teachers deal with the student who comes in who's a little bit more analytical. I'm sure you've had those people come in who you say to them, okay, just have a little noodle and see what feels good, and you can just see them freeze up.
I see the freeze up, and also I always get the thing, oh, so what do you want me to do? I'm like, well, whatever you want. I don't know what I want. Well, just try. It really is. It's diving into the deep end. Just at the start there, So, just learning that it's okay just to play anything. I think that's tricky. It's tricky for some. Certainly, the over analytical student that you have suggested, that kind of student. Yeah.
Yeah, I generally find that what I try and do with that kind of student is we'll work on a solo that I've written, and then I'll give them a parameter that they can change. So I'll say, okay, so why don't you play with how loud and how quietly you're playing each of these notes in the tune, and usually they're okay with that. And then by the time they've played through the solo with their own dynamic elements, they're like, okay, you just improvised. And they're like, no, I didn't, because I was playing what you wrote. It's like, no, I didn't write it like that. You changed things about it. That's improvisation. Yeah. And I think sometimes you need to trick people into doing it. How does this kind of compare with how you started improvising? Can you remember the first steps when you were a beginner?
Yeah, I can. My guitar teacher, who, lovely musician, really talented. When it came to being an all-round musician, he was extremely talented. In terms of being a guitarist, I don't think he necessarily knew what he was doing at any point in time, and would show me. He showed me 5 notes that worked for him anytime that he was put in a position where he would solo. And I kid you not, it was not the pentatonic scale. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't the BB box. It was a very loose representation of what you could play over a major chord. But it did start off like that, and I was, I'll actually show you. So here I have a guitar. It's perfect for this. So it was actually the first tune I ever improvised over was a tune called Kansas City. 12-bar blues kind of thing.
Nice.
And it would go, into the whole progression, and it was in the key of A. So you'd expect A, you'd either use an A major pentatonic. Oh, I've chucked in the blues note there. Or an A minor pentatonic. I know that now, but at the time, Daniel, my guitar teacher, said, oh, well, you can play these 5 notes. Okay. Which is the major 3rd, 5th, 6th, root, and then 9. They don't work for blues. Not really. I think they do now because I know what I can do with those sounds. But at the time, I didn't know bending or like licks. I didn't really know any of that. Before him, I was in a conservatory for music, where it was all classical and, you only play what's on the page. But yeah, messing around with those 5 awkward notes, I started making mistakes that sounded cool. So I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's something going on here. There's something that I can, look into. And so I actually discovered that with a really small change, rather than playing that, I avoided that note like we played, because every time we played, went into the 4 chord, I'd play that, so it would end up sounding
Oh.
clashy and awful. So I just decided that I didn't like that first note that Daniel taught me. So I ignored that. I like those two. So the fifth and sixth, and then the root. Of course, that sounds great. But I realized if I ever slipped up and then played
Oh
the
shit.
flat seven, I was like, oh, that sounds bluesy.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I have only two notes on each of these strings? What happens if I then play 9 and then I used my third finger then to play the next fret? And I was like, okay. And it started making sense. All of those sounds kind of started sort of coming to me. And yeah, I don't know. I'd say that's kind of how it started for me. And then playing along to my favorite tunes and finding out that there was a structure to the things that they were playing. And it was, all part of a scale. And as soon as I learnt the scale, and then started playing along to those tunes even more and tried to pick out the melodies. I was a big Santana fan. And Santana has a habit of playing melodies rather than solos, which are actually really, not impossible to follow. So I would try and follow him, playing along to the song, get it wrong all the time, but always try and catch up. And I found that my vocabulary improved, and also I started discovering all these new techniques, and also being pushed to try and keep up. Just in general, my technique improved. I don't know. It's a bit wishy-washy.
But I think that's really important for people to hear, because you started by being given a little bit of a premise that you can use to improvise. It wasn't actually the most obvious premise. It wasn't the minor pentatonic scale, which is the safest place to start. And I know a lot of harmonica people start with the blues scale. The blues scale is just the minor pentatonic with the 4-draw bend added in second position, which is known as the flat 5. It's a great note, but if you take that out, you've got the minor pentatonic, still a very safe scale to start with. But yeah, you started with a premise, and then you looked at how you could apply it to different situations, and you did trial and error. And I think that the trial and error is the most important thing. And listening to stuff that you really like. It's exactly the same process that you and I and everyone listening has gone through to learn a language. When you're a very small person, you make noises, and you think that you're making noises that are the same noises that your parents are making. And your parents don't look at you and say, try harder. They think it's amazing, and they make noises back at you. You get conversation, and bit by bit, that sort of rough approximation of what you heard turns into actual language. And it's the same with improvisation.
Improvisation and music in general, maybe.
Yeah. I like this idea. You said something cool about awkward notes, and I think that kind of maybe naturally moves into the kind of next level of teaching improvisation. What about step 2? You've got someone who's been improvising for a little bit of time. They're comfortable playing based around a basic scale like the minor pentatonic or the major pentatonic. How do you start introducing those awkward notes, and how can people start learning how to use awkward notes?
I don't know how this will translate to harmonica, but certainly on guitar, the minor pentatonic scale over a major blues is awkward. I mean, it sounds cool, but it is awkward. It's tense, for a lot of most of the notes through the scale. So I think it may be what scale would you start teaching somebody on the harmonica? Is it the major pentatonic or the minor pentatonic?
No, it's always the minor pentatonic. Well, so me personally, as a harmonica teacher, I teach something that I call a simplified pentatonic scale. But it's with a view to getting to the minor pentatonic as quickly as possible. But you need bends for the minor pentatonic and the major pentatonic. But my simplified pentatonic scale has a root, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a flat seventh. So it's everything apart from the minor third from the minor pentatonic.
Right, gotcha.
And obviously there is a degree of awkwardness with that major third, especially over the 4 chord.
Yeah.
But it gets people playing the right shape just physically. They're playing the right holes in the right sequence.
Okay, so just let me interject. So any listeners here that are learning from Tomlin, his simplified minor pentatonic is actually a Mixolydian scale. So you can tell people that, you know, something. A Mixolydian.
You can't call it a Mixolydian scale without the other stuff. It's still only a 5-note scale, whereas the Mixolydian is a 7-note scale.
Yeah, it still sounds impressive though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those are the important notes from the Mixolydian.
And this is the thing, is you kind of build a safe selection of notes without the awkward notes, and that sounds great. But yeah, so I start people with that, but then as soon as they can bend that 3-draw down a half step and get the minor third, then we're in minor pentatonic territory. And I actually don't introduce the major pentatonic until a little bit later. But I mean, that's partly because my angle is very minor pentatonic playing. So it's definitely a focus of mine. It's not necessarily the right approach.
So I don't know. It's a difficult question, Tomlin. Right. So awkward notes. I think it may be the first awkward sounding thing that you'd learn to play within the minor pentatonic scale is use of that flat fifth. And it is, you know, the best example I can think of is Pink Panther, you know. You know, people recognize that fairly quickly. So what I always say is that with improvisation, it is about, building some sort of tension and awkward notes, or if we, you know, to use that word, are really good for building tension, but then resolution is equally important. And I think that flat fifth is probably the first one that I'd tackle, you know, saying you can go up to it, but you don't want to hang on it too low. You got to move away from it fairly quickly, and it'll sound really musical. If you hold on it for... It sounds horrible. It sounds really horrible. But in context, it can sound great. So I think that's probably the first note that, I would say is the awkward one.
Yeah. It's funny because for me, the first kind of awkward note, the first note that I try and get people to really know what they're doing with is what kind of third you're playing over what chord in the progression. So actually playing over changes and highlighting that. So for people listening, we play generally a major third over the 1 chord. So that's the clean 3-draw in second position. You can play the minor third and it sounds really cool, but it's a minor note over a major chord. So there's a level of tension, not a huge level. It's sweet. It's not like the flat 5, but there's a level of tension. But what I really like getting people to learn how to do is to play that major third over the 1 chord and then play the minor third. So bending that note down a half step over the 4 chord.
So you're sort of doing that. Yeah. Great.
And it's just a really good way for a player to demonstrate very quickly that they're thinking about the chord changes and they're thinking about note choice over the chord changes.
See, that's the amazing thing about the harmonica community, as far as I can see. You know, one of the first things you're taught, given the way that the instrument is tuned, is that you really do need to learn how to play over the changes. Otherwise, it won't sound good. On the guitar, you can get away with so much more. You don't need to learn how to play. I didn't really learn how to play over the changes until I was, I don't know, 20 years old. Sorry. So in terms of years playing, years improvising, that's about 10 years on.
Yeah.
And that's late. But, you know, you launch them straight in, which is great. Certainly, you know, you start thinking a lot more musically at an earlier stage than you would with a guitar.
Yeah, I think it's the harmonica, because the way it's laid out, the notes are, you know, kind of very easily achievable to kind of follow a chord progression, but you can't play the chord progression. And I think your role in the band can quite quickly become quite useless if you're just a soloist, whereas a guitarist can always come back to playing the rhythm. So I think learning to follow the changes really demonstrates that you can be a musical addition to a band rather than just someone who wants to have a solo and have their, 20 seconds of fun time.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. We all really want to take a solo, but you've got to put the time in being an accompanist as well.
Yeah. Agreed.
But there are plenty of harmonica players who kind of go along the journey themselves and just discover the sweet sounding like wailing notes and don't know how to play over the changes. And they still sound great. They still do something that works as a solo, but then they're quite limited outside of that. They can't back up a singer and a guitarist just by kind of noodling using wailing notes. It doesn't really work.
I hear you. Yeah. Cheers, buddy. It's nice to chat.
Yeah, it's great to chat. How's that Innocent Gun going down?
Oh, it's good. Probably a little bit too easy.
There's nothing wrong with that. It was your birthday yesterday, so it's still birthday time.
Yeah, that's the way I'm treating it anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so how important do you find? I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. I want to come back to these different steps of teaching, but I'm always really interested with any player with how they visualize improvising themselves. So not necessarily how they teach it, but and let's just keep it within a 12-bar blues for now. Kind of keep it quite simple harmonically. How do you approach that?
I don't know. It's hard to say, Tomlin. When I learnt the stuff, it was all by ear. I didn't have somebody teaching me how to play the blues other than listening to the blues. That's probably quite an irritating answer.
It's not at all. It's really good for people to hear because that's how I've learned, and that's how most people learn. I think I don't know what you think about this, but the idea that improvisation has to be purely creative is, I think, wrong. I think improvisation is taking vocabulary and making it your own and applying it to the situation you're in a musical way.
Well, I think maybe I did that, but completely by accident.
Yeah.
I'm still learning really basic blues licks. I really like the most recent blues lick that I learned is 2 notes, and I love it. It's honestly one of my favorite licks. It's when you move into the 4th chord, you just play the 3rd from the 4th chord and then the root above of the 4th. It's a Matt Schofield lick. Okay. I've been milking it. I've been using it far too much, but let's say we're over the 1. So 2, 3, 4. Just that. Okay. Nice. I'm still learning all that kind of stuff. But I think when I approach improvisation over a 12-bar blues now, I do think about the changes a lot more than I used to. I think it's become a bit of a mission to, rather than set out to impress people by flashy note choices. I've been trying to simplify my playing just to be as tasteful as possible. It's been a long journey. I think I'm still on it as well.
But that's the joy of it, isn't it? You're constantly trying to find your voice and refine your voice, and that's every good musician does that. Just as a side note for any harmonica players who want to know what those notes were, that would be the 2-blow and 4-blow over the 4 chord. So you've got the 2-blow, which is the 3rd, then you're jumping up to the 4-blow, which is the root note but an octave above the 1-blow. And that would be a really nice move. And that's the question I get all the time from harmonica students is, can you teach me some 4 chord licks? And this is something that I'm kind of intrigued from you, how you approach playing over a 4 chord. Do you think chord arpeggio, or do you think scale change? Like what's the angle?
So now it's chord arpeggio. Now it's an arpeggio thing.
Uh-huh.
Because I found that those notes were just way more fun. But when I recognized that there was a change, I would just change from a minor pentatonic or major pentatonic into a Dorian scale. Dorian, and that is from the one. So to be very specific here, let's say we're in the key of G.
Okay.
So
You've played with harmonica players before.
So if I'm playing my minor pentatonic or even my major pentatonic, I realize that if I change then to a G Dorian scale, which is only a very small change from a minor pentatonic, you're adding a note to a minor pentatonic. So instead of just playing that, I'm excluding the blues note just to make it a little bit more simple. I'm going to add that note there, so that's an E.
Okay.
What's that for you?
So that's the 6. Yeah?
It is the 6, but
yeah.
in terms of, were you doing a 4 blow or something?
Well, so it would be a 5 blow.
I was close.
Yeah.
So
close.
I didn't. So when I found out that I could just, I'd play like that. I'd play like that over a 4, and it doesn't sound bluesy at all.
But it's funny because you say that you're switching to the Dorian, but in my mind you're not switching to the Dorian. You're starting to outline the arpeggio notes of the 4 chord because you're throwing in the 3rd of the 4 chord, which you wouldn't play over the 1 chord.
Yeah. So, but this is how it started.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I was just, right. So this is just I'm adding 1 note, and now I've got a cool scale that has a fancy name. But it then went from just playing these sort of Dorian licks, or including the 6, and then resolving back to the 1 and things like that. It went from that into me recognizing the shape that I can get from including that 6. I can actually now have a diminished scale over the 4.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a while ago I figured this out. I didn't really have the ear to use it properly, but I feel like I'm getting there now. So if I'm playing over the C, the 4 chord, I can start this little arpeggio from the 3rd, the minor 3rd.
Is that the minor 3rd of the 4 chord?
No, so
like
this
a minor 3rd of the 1 chord. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm starting up, starting there, going to my flat 5, 6. Okay. The root of the 1 chord, so G, and the minor 3rd, and Okay. It sounds stupid. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't work for blues music at all. But, within context, it can. So let me try and put something over that. So over the 1. So I don't know if you heard that run.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite an exotic sound, but it's all fine. You've got 3rd, flat 5, 6, root, minor 3rd. They're all acceptable notes. And then resolving to the 3rd there for the 1. I don't know. So that was the next step of playing over the 4, and then finally it was like, all that fancy stuff is overkill. Let me just play the root, 3rd and 5th of the 4 chord. That sounds great. I'll take that.
Yeah, it's an interesting process because I never did the fancy stuff because I'm not that smart. So I kind of watch you do the diminished stuff, and I was like, my brain is struggling to keep up, and there's a bit of me that feels that part of it is kind of mechanically advantageous on the instrument. So that move on the guitar kind of makes sense. You know, the notes are laid out in a way that your fingers can find them quite easily. Whereas if I try and replicate that on the harmonica, it's definitely doable, but it's not something that I'm going to find by accident.
Okay.
The other thing that I'm slightly not sure about is whether, you know, the diminished idea works if you're hanging on any of the notes, or if it's kind of built on the idea that you have to get through it quickly and resolve to something safe.
Well, actually, you can hold on those notes, because with the exception of the flat 5, because we can all agree that a flat 5 sounds pretty gross if you hold on it. But the other notes are fine. You know, you've got the root, the minor third, and the sixth.
So that's nothing too weird. And you know, the flat third is the flat 7 of the 4 chord, so that's a nice one. The 6 is the third of the. Okay, so it does all make sense. It just sounds so exotic when you play it like that.
Yeah, but those notes just, you know, you can just repeat the same notes over and over again, and you are playing a diminished scale, but they're completely appropriate and okay to do. Yeah,
nice.
And that's a transferable, you know, thing. But like you said, mechanically advantageous on the guitar for sure. But I can use that same lick that I just played there, or that same arpeggio. I can use that in loads of different contexts, and it'll work. Yeah. It was a good thing to have under the belt.
That's cool. Whereas, you know, harmonica, the kind of mechanically advantageous thing is all the blow notes on the harmonica are the 4 chord. Like,
well, in my very limited ability on the harmonica, even I know that.
Yeah, but you know, so you can do these kind of. You can kind of slide up and you're playing a very fast arpeggio, but you're just blowing through 3 notes and then throwing in the flat 7, which will either be the 3 draw half step bend in the lower octave or the 6 overblow in the middle octave, or the 10 double blow bend, I think. So yeah, that's something that I think the arpeggio playing is more obvious in some ways on the harmonica than it would be on the guitar. Yeah, I think it makes sense for a beginner to play arpeggios on a harmonica a lot sooner than a guitar beginner.
Oh yeah, no, it's trying to. I have you know, quite a few very talented students, but I still need to convince them of this stuff. I still have to, you know, really sell to them that they need to practice arpeggios and understand, you know, the structure of chords and the scales that they're playing and the notes that they're choosing. It's important to know what they are. You know?
Okay, so this is a great question, and this is something that I get asked all the time, which is, how important is it for me to know music theory?
Do you like music?
Yeah.
Then you should know theory. I know it's a bit blunt.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think, well, sorry, that's, you know, maybe even that's unfair. I think if you like playing music and you like discovering new sounds, and you enjoy, you know, figuring things out by ear or anything like that, I think it is important to know theory. Without that, you're memorizing things visually or physically. You're not thinking about the sound of things or why a certain note with over a harmony would bring a certain emotion with it. You know, you need to understand the formula.
Yeah. What do you say to the person who comes back to you and says, well, what about my creativity? Am I not going to lose my creativity if I know the rules?
No, there are no rules. There's theory.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, I don't know what a good way to put it. Oh yeah, okay. So let's think about theory like the colors of the rainbow. All right, we've broken them down into you know, very, you know, but it's such a spectrum. There are so many things that are there in between each color, you know, and it's the same thing with theory. If you know what the foundations are, you can start manipulating things in a way that, you know, the possibilities are endless. Musically speaking, I don't think, you know, with all the music that we've had over the last hundreds of years, we're not done. We're not finished with the plain formula. We're still working within 12 notes.
Yeah. That's the thing.
In Western music, anyway.
Yeah.
And we're not even finished with that.
No.
We have to kind of ignore, most commercial pop music at the moment. But, I don't think we're done. Don't think we're done discovering what we can do just with those 12 notes.
Yeah. And I think that the argument for having a strong foundation of music theory to help you discover things is it's so important, because there is the anecdote of if you sat a bunch of monkeys down at typewriters, they would eventually, by sheer chance, write the complete works of Shakespeare. But it's going to take so long, and it's going to be complete luck. Versus, if you know the rules, then you can, sorry, I keep saying rules, and you're right, there are no rules. But if you understand theory, then it gets you there so much faster, and you can make intelligent decisions about how you play and your note choice. I guess one thing that a lot of people wonder about is how this functions in the heat of the moment. So we're talking a lot about practicing improvisation and thinking about note choice, but I don't think that you do that quite so rigorously in the heat of the moment, do you?
No, I'll occasionally, give myself a nudge and remind myself that I need to think about what I'm doing now and then, just to reel it in. I do get carried away. You know that.
I'm saying nothing.
yeah. After 100-bar solo, I think it gets a bit much. I think in a live situation, I really love, and right now during these times miss the moments where I cease to think about what I'm doing and only listen to what I'm playing as I'm playing it. It's something so very, second nature and automatic now, that I get to enjoy the experience almost as a listener as I'm playing. But the process is happening so quickly that if I do play something that focuses very much on, again, in the context of a 12-bar blues, if I'm following the changes, I will occasionally make conscious decisions to play certain things. But it just happens so quickly. Yeah. And I think that's only a result of, when I have a lot of free practice that I don't play with a metronome, I play along to music, or sometimes I just noodle.
Noodle is a technical term, by the way.
A technical term for just doing whatever the hell you want. Yeah. I don't know. I think the more free practice I've done and the more noodling, it's allowed me to become very meditative when I play, and sort of not become overwhelmed with all the things that I should be doing, and just play what I feel.
Yeah, I think that's the best advertisement for doing lots of practice ever, is do tons of practice so that you can forget what you're doing when you need to. Yeah. And I think when I start taking a solo, I generally think about the first 2 bars, and then usually everything stems from that, following my kind of patterns that I know and my ways of improvising, my ways of thinking around a chord change. There's something I really love that Harry talks about with his students, and he's actually done a seminar over at the Harmonica School. But it's this idea of different stages in a solo. And that's something that goes through my mind when I'm playing sometimes. And I've watched you play following these different stages, which you call different gears. And kind of, you have a first part of the solo. And let's imagine that you were doing a kind of 48-bar solo. If you're very, very fortunate, they let you go 4 times round. So will you talk to us a little bit about these different gears and how you think about them?
Sure. I think the metaphor Of gears, I mean, you could use many things. You're trying to create a narrative with your solo. It's definitely a good thing to create a narrative and a theme within your solo, and that, musically speaking, that means you're playing very dynamically. Playing with the intensity of the notes, whether you're playing them loud or quiet. The frequency as well. How fast you're playing them. How you can hold on to certain tones, like those awkward notes we were talking about, building tension and release. Within the whole geared structure, let's say you do have those 4 rounds of a 12-bar blues. You want to ease people in with an idea, a simple melodic idea that you can play around with and make very small changes to suit the chord changes. Let's see. It was the first 12 bars of a solo, so I'll just play the turnaround. Pretty laid back, but it doesn't take much for me to then adapt that to the 4 chord. Yeah. Even for the 5. So that would be, a nice and easy first gear. So, taking lots of breaks, lots of breathing space in between all of that. You're not playing constantly through it all. Gear 2, gear 2 is when you start taking those ideas, and you fill in the gaps with a few other things, a few more variations. So you're not leaving as much space in between your phrasing, and just start making things a bit more exciting. So that doesn't mean you're playing faster. It just means that you're filling more space. It can mean that you're playing faster or louder, but I think you can save that for the next step. You're following me?
I'm following you. Definitely.
Yeah.
One thing I'll just really quickly interject. I'm sure the listeners noticed that first gear was so sweet and easy to listen to that you could whistle back or hum back what you heard. You've not challenged the listener yet. That comes later. I think that's an important thing. Is you want to reel them in at the beginning of the solo, make it easy to follow, so that they're really paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. And then in gear 2 is where you probably want to, start having an argument with the audience a little bit. We'll save the presidential debate for gear 3. But well, you did say this wasn't a political podcast.
That's true.
So, leading into the same idea, I played it. So just getting a bit more exciting there, but still keeping that groove going. So, and also definitely, playing within the bars, musical ideas within a bar. Or within a couple of bars, so not playing over the bar. That definitely comes later. So gear 3, that's when you can start taking some really repetitive ideas or patterns to build speed and tension again. So if I was in my 3rd round of a 12-bar blues after playing that for, the 24... Yeah, so that's a much longer phrase, and that would have played over the bar as well. So again, getting more exciting, and then saving all your best stuff for your last gear, your 4th round. That can be, speedy licks or the highest level of intensity of which you can play. Some players, the person I can think of that demonstrates that really well is a guitarist called Derek Trucks, slide player. He just moves up on up. So he moves up higher in his register on the instrument. You know, it keeps moving up, but doesn't play any faster or anything like that. But it'll start holding notes and really trying to make those sing.
Yeah.
So he's not a fast player by any means. I'm sure he can play fast, but he doesn't choose to. But yeah, that's his final gear is definitely all the really sweet singing notes and wailing notes, as you put them earlier, at the highest level of intensity.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think all of that is open to your own interpretation, and there are no rules. It's a guideline, and you do want to take people on a bit of a journey when you are soloing. And if you have to think of it as well, you're not playing for the audience. Like, there are certain moments where you want to make people dance and have fun or whatever else, but when we're not playing music for other people. You're playing music for yourself. And I don't mean that to be, it's not your opportunity to be extremely self-indulgent, but as much as you want to take other people on a journey through your, improvisation, you want to take yourself on one as well.
Interesting. That's a really interesting point, which I'm not sure I agree with. Or I will kind of slightly twist it and say that for me, I think that the most important thing is not necessarily playing for yourself or playing for the audience, but serving the music and not taking away from what you're creating with other people. It's a shared experience, and obviously you're trying to add your flavor to it, but there's a huge difference between a musician playing with other musicians and a musician who could do what they're doing with a backing track or with a band. Like we've seen those kind of clinic musicians, and I'm not detracting from clinic musicians in any way whatsoever, but there is a certain breed of clinic musician who just has an iPod with backing tracks, and it's very self-indulgent, and they're not interacting with what's happening musically in any kind of meaningful way.
I do understand what you're saying. The reason that I won't agree with it all the way is I don't think we're ever going to see incredible musicians that don't try and push the boundaries of all of that. So serving the music is extremely important in every context, I think, aside from improvisation. And when that comes to blues music and jazz especially, it is all about discovery. And your band, they're your support, and you will be their support when it comes around to them as well. It's scary. Things might go wrong. The song, the music that you're playing has never been played before. And I think in genres such as jazz and blues, and in generally any genre where improvisation plays a big part, I think that serving the music, it ends as soon as you start freely expressing yourself in the moment.
Okay.
I don't say that I don't mean that you stop playing musically. You have to,
Yeah.
But letting loose, and that's where you get the greats. That's where you get some new things. New things happening. That's not going to happen if you're staying within the rules and the boundaries of serving the music.
Okay. I think you're disagreeing with me, but you're also kind of agreeing with me in that there is a set of rules that you still need to be following. You can't just go completely left field and depart from the musical structure that you're in.
Oh, no.
You're also not going to play. You're not going to overstay your welcome.
No.
You're still thinking about that.
Yeah. I don't look. The whole. I don't mean you get up there. It's your time to solo. I don't mean it's it's only your moment. I'm not saying that we should all be selfish in that, but I do mean in terms of improvisation itself, in the form of improvisation, be very free and don't worry.
Yeah.
And definitely push the boundaries of it all. That doesn't mean play a 5-minute solo. No.
No, I'm with you. I agree with that. And also, I'm very, very aware that it's always a moment that is more ego driven, and not necessarily in a bad way. It's you're pushing yourself to, you should be pushing yourself to demonstrate to yourself that you can do something and you can do better than you've done before.
Well, there's that, but you're also pushing the audience.
Yeah.
And you should be pushing the audience. You should make the audience question whether you're going to get out of this alive, whether it sounds good.
Yeah.
And when that is a success, there's no better feeling.
Definitely.
In my opinion.
Definitely. No, I agree with you on that. And I think that this kind of comes to a very important part of improvisation, which is confidence. You can play absolutely anything that we've spoken about, and if you're a little bit apologetic while you're doing it, it's not going to work. Even if you're playing something that's incredibly safe, it's not going to work. There's definitely got to be that confidence and attitude of, damn straight, this is what I'm playing, and this works. This is how I'm expressing myself in this moment right now. And there's a lot of stuff that's really quite difficult musically, quite janky in terms of how it sits harmonically over the backing, that unless you really mean it and you commit to it, it doesn't work. Right. So I don't want to kind of turn into a 3-hour-long chat about improvisation. I'm sure we could. I'm really sure we could. But I'd love some pithy tips for people about how to approach improvisation. Like what are your kind of top 3 things to think about?
Okay. Well, to think about, I don't know. Top 3 things to try and experiment with is playing along with the music that you really like. I assume for harmonica players, you need to find out the key of the song. That's going to be important.
I'm just going to interject and say that all musicians, you need to find out the key of the song.
Well, I mean, in the way of I'm actually not specifically playing harmonica music. Any music that you really enjoy. Let's say you wanted to play along to "All Right Now" by Free. Great tune. There's no harmonica in that, but maybe learning how to find out what key it is and what you can do within that, and then just playing along, filling in the gaps in between the vocal lines, between the lyrics, or playing at the same time, doing whatever you want, playing over the track. Do that. If you're a big Rolling Stones fan, put one of their records on and play along. And for that 45-minute album that you're playing along to, you're part of the band. Hopefully you're not doing that in front of so many people, but it's just fun. It's just really fun, and it does open doors into developing your technique and your ability. I think that's probably the main thing for me anyway, what I would suggest to people. Second is just know your theory. Know why certain things work, and if something jumps out at you as being very, if something sounds particularly cool, or you really like the feeling that you get when you hear something, try and find out what that is and why. Why you feel that way, and how you can use it in your own playing. And lastly, it's do your homework, do the practice.
Yeah.
Run the drills. I don't think I'd be very good at improvising if I didn't have the technique behind me. I really don't think if I didn't spend hours working on how to play certain patterns within a scale, I don't think I'd be a very good player. I certainly wouldn't be a confident player.
Yeah, it's that fluidity and flow that comes from, that your technique will get out of the way so that you can express the musical ideas that you want to. If you're also thinking, how do I go through this pattern while you're trying to improvise?
So, sorry, you made me think about something. So, very recently, I was teaching a student of mine patterns of 3. So that's going up 3 notes and then back 1 and continuing on from there. So musically, so completely unexciting. However, something really fun happens when when you're playing over music and you do those lines. So did you hear any mistakes there?
Oh yeah,
because there were a bunch. I didn't stick to the patterns of 3, and that's the point. Is that like if I'm playing over some music, if I play that pattern perfectly, it sounds crap.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to sound good. But if I occasionally mess up whilst doing my practice, or this is what I would consider doing practice, is trying to play those runs of 3. I'm like, oh man, I'm actually being really free with what I'm playing. I'm not playing what I wanted to, but I found myself in a completely different place, and I want to keep on going. So maybe something to also try is rather than just playing along to a metronome. I think you should be doing that. But if you have patterns to practice like this or anything repetitive, even if it's as simple as play that over music that you really enjoy in the key of the song, and you're going to make mistakes. So as soon as you start pushing for the next subdivision, you want to play it faster, you're going to start making mistakes, and try and keep going even with the mistakes, and you'll end up discovering completely new things. And also you'll be giving yourself the confidence that when you do go into a pattern like that, if you do make a mistake, it doesn't matter. You've got somewhere to go. You have a recovery. I think the more you do that, the more free you become.
I think those are brilliant tips. And yeah, make mistakes and learn how to deal with it is huge. The idea of playing along with records and playing with great musicians is so much better for you than joining your buddies who are also beginners and jamming with them. Like that's a lot of fun, but you're not going to learn what it feels like to play with a band that are really solid and tight.
Yeah. I mean, doing both, amazing. Do it if you can. But playing along to your favorite music is a great way to have the best backing band possible for that situation, I suppose.
Definitely. Well, Harry, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
That's okay. Thanks for having me.
And before we part ways, where is the best place for people to find out more about you and get in touch if they want to do some music lessons?
So if in terms of music lessons, well, the best place to go is to strollersmusic.co.uk, and you can get in touch there regarding online lessons. I do only offer one-to-one video lessons at the moment, but I have some availability and happy to take anybody on if they've got any questions.
Very cool. One thing I would say to, obviously the angle of this podcast is very harmonica focused. Sitting down with other musical instrument teachers, good musical instrument teachers, is just as helpful, if not more so, than sitting down with a harmonica teacher, because they will think about things differently and they'll get you thinking purely musically rather than within the confines of your instrument. And I think that's really, really helpful. So even if it's just a handful of lessons with a saxophonist or a drummer, I had lessons with a drummer last year, and that did huge things for my playing. I think it's really, really beneficial to take you out of that harmonica zone.
I have some news for you just before we wrap up. I don't know if I told you this, but I booked myself a guitar lesson.
No way. Who did you get a lesson with?
Ariel Posen.
No way. Wow.
So for those who don't know Ariel Posen, he's an incredibly talented guitarist. and I knew that he was teaching occasionally, like he would occasionally do Skype lessons, and a post came up on. I follow him on Instagram, and a post came up, and he said, "Oh, I'll be doing some online lessons, some Skype lessons in October. Get in touch. There are limited spaces." And I happened to be on my Instagram app just as maybe probably like a few minutes after he posted it. There weren't that many views on it yet, so I immediately sent him a message saying, "I'd love to book in. Do you have any space available?" And yeah, I do. So on the 13th of October, I've got my Skype lesson. I'll be a student again for the first time in 13 years.
That's cool. That's really cool. And also really great for people to hear that an amazingly talented, confident, professional guitarist is still excited about getting lessons and still has stuff to learn.
I have a lot to learn, and I have a very long list of questions for him. Yeah, I don't think you ever stop learning.
No, I agree. And I still get lessons, and highly recommend it. All right. Well, Harry, this has been delightful, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. We can chat about some other musical related stuff.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we can play together soon. That would be delightful.
That would be good. Maybe we'll start, hopefully you'll be able to start doing some of your podcasts face to face.
Dude, that would be delightful.
Yeah, that would be good.
All right. Well, catch you later.
All right, man. You take care. Thanks very much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my Harmonica podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast service of choice. And if you're ready to take your harmonica playing to the next level, then you should check out my online harmonica school over at tomlinharmonicaschool.com. Happy harping!